Hey guys, I'm going to explain to you a brief overview on how to play our new game, Mana Crypt. I'll start by explaining the parts of the cards. There's the name of the card, the card's ability, if it has one. Some creatures don't have an ability, like the Death Knight. This is the mana cost, how much you need to spend to cast the card. And if it's a creature, it has damage. All creatures will have damage, and spells will not. There's two kinds of cards in this game: spells on the bottom and creatures on the top. There are 6 factions in Mana Crypt. There's Heavenly, Marvel, Mortal, Demonic, Possessed, and Undead. So when you're playing, this is basically what the setup will look like. You're going to have your deck, your graveyard or discard pile, your mana pile, and the cards that will be in your hand. So there's basically phases in the game. There's your start phase, which is basically the start of your turn, and where your epic spells trigger, but I'll get into that later, or that'll be in the rulebook. Then you have the mana phase, which is the phase where you take 3 cards from your deck and you put them in your mana pile. The order doesn't matter, they're just all together, and that's the mana phase. Now, the draw phase is when you decide how many of your mana cards you'll draw to your hand. So, say this turn I'm going to want to play my Warlock. He costs 3 mana. I'm going to want to leave at least 3 mana to play the Warlock. So I'm going to decide to draw 2 cards, leaving 3 mana to be able to play my Warlock. So you can take any 2, it doesn't matter, but you can only do this once, and you have to do them at the same time. So we go to Vampire Bat and Godly Strength. So, to play cards, this is how you would play them. You say you're going to declare your card, and you take your mana cards, and you place them under the card that you're going to play, and then you play them all to your graveyard. Creatures and spells are all played to the graveyard. Every time a creature is played, you deal the damage, and if it has an ability, you do that as well. So the Warlock says, player gains 2 mana. So, for the Warlock, you would simply gain 2 more mana. Now you have 2 more mana to play any other cards. This game was designed so you didn't have to use any dice or spin downs or anything to keep track of your mana or your life. You use only the cards to do so. Now, when you take damage in this game, you start with 20 life, essentially, and if someone deals damage to you, you have a health pile, or it'll be your damage pile. So when the Warlock attacks the opponent, they would take 2 cards and put them off to the side. When you have 20 damage cards, that means you lose. So damage cards and mana cards are always face down. You can never look at them. That would be considered cheating. When you gain life in Mana Crypt, you simply remove cards from your damage pile and put them back onto your deck. And that's how you keep track of your health in this game, and how you keep track of your mana. So the 5 phases of Mana Crypt are the start phase, your mana phase, where you draw mana at the beginning of your turn, your draw phase, when you choose how many of your mana cards you want to draw to your hand as playable cards, then the action phase, where you play any cards that you want, as long as you have enough mana to play them, and then your end phase, where you declare the end of your turn. There are a lot of cards in Mana Crypt that target creatures and spells specifically. Spells are different from creatures because spells will only have one ability, where creatures could have multiple abilities and always deal damage. And there are also cards that target spells specifically, and there are cards that target creatures specifically. The last thing I want to go over is faction abilities, and these abilities alone are why you're going to want to make faction-specific decks. These faction abilities are called cut abilities, because when you play them, you're going to be cutting the deck. Infernal Beast states, Pain, parentheses 3. Player loses 2 life if card cut is demonic. So, the number in the parentheses is how many times you're going to cut the deck. Whenever you cut the deck, you reveal it. So for Infernal Beast, we're going to do it 3 times. So none of those cards were demonic, but if they were, each time that you cut a demonic card, you would deal an additional 2 damage to your opponent. There are 2 ways you can play Mana Crypt, with a community deck or when you build your own decks. When you build your own deck, you're probably going to want to use no more than 2, maybe even 3 factions. So when you cut the deck, there's more chances that you'll get the specific faction that you want. Since you're using cards for your mana and your health in Mana Crypt, having at least 40 to 50 cards per player is ideal. You could play with as many people as you want, whether community or building your own decks. But if you're using a community deck, 1 box will be good for about 2 people. If you want to play with 4 people, you might want to buy 2 copies of the game. When using a community deck, you can have any cards you want in the deck. When you're playing with built decks, most cards have a limit of 4. You can't have more than 25 of each faction, and epic cards are limited to 1. Building a deck is more of an advanced game and has a lot more strategy involved. There are more in-depth rules in the rulebook about building your own deck. So that's a brief overview of our game Mana Crypt, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.